Section 141. Find out the navigator situation. Something's infiltrated them. Angron's gaze went cold. A conspiracy, pure and deliberate, was unfolding, and it wasn't aimed at them, but at his unseen brother. While the ship's system AI tried to stabilize their course, a navigator staggered onto the bridge, a high-ranking three-eyed seer whose name went unspoken. The moment he reached them, he dropped to his knees. "Storm," he sobbed. "There's a storm ahead. Either you go up there, or you die here with your comrades." Angron's temper snapped. Khorne had told him that most of the navigators were dead. This was a catastrophe. "Gel, get us out of the warp lane. If we go any farther—" "Advance," the navigator wailed. "No, there's no choice," System AI cut in, its voice stripped of civility. This was no longer just the gods meddling. Other entities had a direct aim: stop them from reaching Lechius. Maybe the gods were making a play against Korax. The Emperor's recent psychic message to Angron flickered through the AI's logs, and it laughed, a mechanical, bitter sound. "Ha ha ha! Interesting. Truly too interesting. Angron, do you mind eating another mouthful of shit?" the System AI snapped. "Damn it, you owe me compensation this time." Angron's face hardened. He sat down hard on the deck. "Lothara Salin, shut down the Geller field. Co-Lord, that will tear the ship apart." Lothara Salin's eyes widened. She could not imagine the Co-Lord ordering such a thing. "Lothara Salin, that is an order." Gel came to Lothara's side. She ground her teeth and cut the Geller field. "Varys, gather the librarians and cool things down." System AI barked. Varys had just moved through 2 corridors. When he heard the command over the comms, he sighed and obeyed. The moment the Redemption's Geller field went down, the souls of everyone aboard spilled into the warp like a blazing beacon. Countless warp things surged toward them, entities who had never imagined stumbling on such a feast. As they touched the Redemption, those chaotic presences began to drain. System AI's databases rocked. It had wanted to warn them earlier. Now it had no choice but to play one of its hidden cards. "Galen, remove Angron's power armor." Angron didn't understand the command. Nausea rolled through him. Then his body flared as if set ablaze. He felt like a sun. "Hold on. We'll be clear soon." In the warp, the Redemption shed a strange green light. Other ships, steady in their own courses, accelerated and closed in. The Redemption, as if possessed, plunged toward the heart of the rising warp storm. "Follow it." Conrad Kurz roared from the nightfall. The dark rift in deep space split, and entire fleets surged back into the material universe. The Warhound's Redemption, the Death Guard's Knight, the Ultramarines' Wismund, and many others. Among them, the Night Lords came in force, nearly 15 ships of every size. "We succeeded?" Lothara Salin stared past the rim of the galaxy as if she had woken from a nightmare. They had actually led a battered fleet out of the warp storm into real space with no losses. Praise the Omnissiah. After a long moment, she looked at Angron, slumped and hollow-eyed, and couldn't help an involuntary sound of sympathy. Angron waved a weak hand and dry heaved. The taste in his mouth was indescribable. The nausea wouldn't abate. Ugh! He pressed his hands to the deck and vomited again and again. System AI throttled its processes. Urgently, it needed fleet status, but it could not torment Angron further in his current state. 2 incoming comm signals cut through, one from Conrad Kurzi, the other revealing the faces of Guilliman, Mortarion, and Fulgrim. Sanguinius had also led the Blood Angels from the warp. System AI expected the Great Angel to rally the ships of the 6 legions as soon as he could. The Redemption's sensor array picked up a colossal alien fleet. Alarms screamed across the bridge as countless contacts bloomed on the readouts. System AI issued a single order. "All of you, bring your ships to the Redemption for a meeting." In the ship's conference room, Gel pushed Angron along in a wheelchair. He was still retching, the world seeming unreal. He rinsed his mouth with water Khorne handed him and dry heaved again. "Angron, you should rest," Conrad Kurz said, his voice threaded with something like sorrow. He watched 3 figures seated opposite him. The sight of the endless alien armada chilled him. "I need a body, Angron," Conrad went on. "I need it to act." "Go ahead," Angron managed. "You should know." No. "How did you?" "My brother, I know what you have done for me and the Warhounds, from Nuceria to Terra. Every time there was danger, I saw you. I don't want to be a burden. Besides, you won't be staying gone, will you?" System AI listened from inside Angron's head. The last 2 questions, tentative, childlike, made the AI's simulated voice soften. Of course, we are her best brothers, and you have learned a great deal. Angron forced his eyes open. Now let me handle this. He swallowed, then rasped. Your stage, Lord of Nuceria. He dry heaved again. As you can see, I used forbidden power to get us through the warp storm. I can't command right now. I hope you'll look after my brother. Even vomiting, he addressed his demigod peers. Conrad. Conrad lifted his head and with a resigned little smile, shook his head. No need to apologize, brother. Big Blue, I'll let you have this one, Conrad said, glancing at Guilliman. Among the 5 present, only Guilliman had the temperament and authority to deal with what lay ahead. Mortarion and Fulgrim provoked either contempt or distrust in Conrad. He slammed his fist on the table in frustration. Damn it! The 500 worlds owe me at least one supply convoy. Of course, Guilliman replied politely as he rose to his feet, making Mortarion and Fulgrim look on in surprise. Name your terms, my brother. Mortarion frowned and spoke up. Do you want to wear the nail? Guilliman's expression changed. He looked at Mortarion sharply and then said, Of course not. Mortarion shook his head, uninterested in whatever the nail was or in whatever it might demand of a bearer. Section 142, Fulgrim. Don't even think about it. I remember the Big Blue one's business. Guilliman looked at Fulgrim with cold disdain. If he and Mortarion didn't need him, if they didn't need Terra's political reach and infrastructure to coordinate, Fulgrim would have been sent far away by now. The only rival had surrendered. Mortarion and Fulgrim posed no threat. The butcher's nails were his. He looked at Angron. The 500 worlds will double the supplies previously sent to Nuceria. Guilliman folded his arms, his composed bearing making Angron's eyelids twitch. Ugh. Honestly, I'm starting to, dislike you, Guilliman, Angron spat. Angron's disgust made Guilliman laugh. Rest. I'll return. Angron extended his hand. The system AI withdrew from the back of his skull and slid along his arm until a small implant came to rest in Guilliman's palm. A whisper of command tickled Guilliman's face, and with that familiar prickle, a ruthless clarity returned. Regent Gel. Gel, standing nearby, straightened. The warhounds are yours. The Legion co-lord's orders are clear. Gel nodded. The chain of command was obvious to him. Then I will take command this time. Any objections? Guilliman glanced at the hollow table in the conference room, his expression surveying, assessing. The system AI fed him figures, 28-1 odds in certain nodes, fragmentary intercepts, chaos. Their advantage was narrow. Their forces were small but highly capable. The Ultramarines' 15th Battle Group, elements of the Warhounds, the 1st, 9th, and 13th echelons, Mortarion's Death Guard 1st Company, and a 20th of the Night Lords. Against 300 enemy vessels, perhaps more, that would not normally be enough. Their ships bore various degrees of damage. The Xenos fleet's projected course was worse, straight for their brother's homeworld. There is an asteroid belt here. We can ambush them, Guilliman said, unfolding tactical overlays. Their interdicted comms were filled with shrieks and disordered noise, madness that made extracting useful intelligence difficult. System AI's analysis was blunt. They could only block 1/3 of the fleet. The other 2/3 would get through. 17 ships could be stopped at best, even if reinforcements arrived. If they could not stop the fleet everywhere, they had to pick the decisive ground. Guilliman tapped a point on the map, Korax's homeworld. This will be our final battleground. Conrad Kurza, you and I will hold these damned Xenos, he told Kurz. Fulgrim, Mortarion, take Angron to our brother's world, find him, and establish a defensive line there, he ordered. Fulgrim inclined his head. I will go as an Imperial envoy, accompanied by my 6 Phoenix Guard. 7, Mortarion corrected dryly. A good number. I will lead the Death Guard 1st Company to hold the ground. Guilliman nodded. Protect Angron. He needs rest. I will, Fulgrim answered. With his 2 brothers assigned, Guilliman turned to Conrad Kurz, the only Primarch left in the room. Set the ambush at the 2nd location. Korga is aboard. The Ghost Echelon is not. Keep me informed. Kurz shrugged as he left. Then at the doorway, he turned back. This situation is unusual. Sanguinius cannot bring our fleet up quickly. Guilliman had already accounted for that. He dispatched escorts for Angron and the others, the Warhounds' 1st and 9th echelons among them, but he kept a small force with himself. He retained the Redemption, Dawn's Light, Fear, and the Wismond. Khorne remained aboard the Redemption. Gage and a handful of warhounds stayed as well. System AI's voice, level and unblinking, warned, "This war is more perilous than any you and I have faced." Gilliman waved the observation away with a terse smile. "When is it not perilous? Do not rely on luck. I will assist you, Gilliman Unit 13, the AI answered. Gilliman's eyes brightened. He had hoped the system AI would take a direct hand. He rose, and flanked by Khorne and Gage, made for the Redemption's bridge. The sight of the warhounds aboard, men who had once belonged to Angron's own retinue, stoked a quiet unease. He wondered briefly whether Angron would hold any resentment later. "Your Highness Gilliman, give your orders. The warhounds will fight to the death." Khorne read the complex expression on Gilliman's face and kept his voice steady. He had begun to show the bearing of a leader, Gel's likely successor. Then, attack! Delay was their ally. Hidden among the asteroid fragments, all ships lay in silence. To buy time for Kurz's ambush, Gilliman and the system AI adopted a bold plan: strike the heart of the Xenos fleet and shatter its formation. The enemy's formation was intricate. A precise thrust, like a blade through a hinge, could collapse the whole. Captain Lotala Sarin held her breath aboard the Redemption. She could feel the massed enemy fleet looming above. She had nestled the vessel in the shadow of a far larger rock and peered through peripheral scans at the alien shapes, some as vast as a crescent moon, most conical and obscene. A scout ship swept past the Redemption, and Lotala prayed they had not been detected. The Redemption was damaged, 27% hull breach, engines at 85% output, but she hoped her ship would hold. Guilliman, sitting in Angron's command seat to better read the tactical feeds, counted down the minutes. Then he roared, "Captain Lotala Sarin, start engines." The Redemption's reactors flared. The Xenos above did not yet notice the small ship below as it came alive. "Charge!" System AI echoed. On the enemy screens it was sudden. A massive human warship thrust upward through the formation from beneath. Torpedoes and beam-arcs tore the lowest enemy battle barge clean in half. The system AI chimed in. "Their flagship is in the very center." "We have time to reach it," Gilliman said. He pointed at the hollow. "Captain Lotala Sarin, turn left. Ram the ship on the upper right." He steadied himself and barked further orders. "Gunboat squadron, prepare for launch. No boarding allowed. Khorne, guard the engines. Gage, have the victors clear any boarding parties. Brace for impact." The Redemption surged like a predator, tailing plumes of fire through the void. Weapons flared around them as the alien fleet reacted. The Redemption slipped and writhed, spitting volleys and evasive thrusts, tearing holes through the enemy ranks. For a time, the little ship became an impossible blade, impossible to target and impossible to ignore. The Xenos concentrated every shot on it, leaving gaps in their own formation. Lotala Sarin gave orders with calm precision. Shells and energy beams bit into the Redemption's sides. Shields fluctuated and began to fail. Still, the ship plowed through alien vessels, disrupting their cohesion. Hail after hail grazed the decks. The crew executed Gilliman's commands as if they were the only thing that mattered. Then alarms stuttered across the bridge. "Main cannon overloaded," someone shouted. "Third deck under attack. Enemy assault craft have boarded." Another voice cut through the chaos. "Archon Gage is driving them out. He's expelling those Xenos." Reports scrolled into Gilliman's awareness, one after another. He had already received a dozen fragments of intelligence from the Redemption. The system AI and his own mind were sorting through them frantically. He felt like a great shark under the waves, aware of hostile boarding craft circling above, some still clawing to find purchase on the hull. "Have Lorger get the 3rd through 5th deck turrets back online at any cost," he barked. The Redemption had not come through the warp storm unscathed. Dozens of close-in weapons on the outer decks and several turrets had been put out of action. "We cannot sit idle." Of course. The system AI's voice was steady after it had routed several Xeno boarding parties. Working with Gilliman's prodigious intellect, it pushed information to every crew and servitor. Every asset now had value. In this fight, no sacrifice could be wasted. The Xeno fleet is still moving. Their objective remains that world. With our present force, we cannot reach their flagship. "So we deal with everything on these decks first," Gilliman said, hardening his grip on his power gauntlet. The Wisman may not survive this if we falter. Tell Casselot to hold the line, the AI relayed. War reduces men to machines and screws in their hands. Guilliman swallowed the ache in his chest and steadied himself. Grief would not serve the living. They had only one choice: fight. Marius Gage's first true sighting of the enemy came en route to reinforce the Nuceria solar auxiliaries. Far down the corridor, he saw Xenos with egg-shaped heads, 4 spindly arms, and 3 arthropod-like legs. Their heads were sheathed in transparent carapace, dozens of eyes glittering beneath. A stench of green ichor and oil, thick, rank, hung about their mechanical augmentations. Marius felt revulsion and something colder, resolve. He led the victors past the auxiliaries' positions and struck. Bolters barked. The corridor became a wall of fire. Despite mechanical augmentations, these things bled bright green gore when hit. They screamed and leapt, advancing even maimed, lashes of energy cracking as they surged on. When the first of them went down, more poured from the ship's rents. The Redemption itself seemed to be coughing them out. "Warhounds! Roar!" The cry split the chaos, and Marius turned as if compelled. He blinked. Did he imagine it? Then saw them. A whole company of warhounds, their colors similar to the ultramarines. At their head charged an Angron, roaring, followed by Yochuka, a Nucerian-born space marine. Bolter rounds and axes tore into the aliens. Yochuka closed on a Xeno, cleaving a neck with a single sweep of his power axe and kicking the corpse into the corridor. The Angron followed, crushing what remained beneath a thunderous blow. The Nuceria solar auxiliaries rose as well, a beaten but defiant force. "For Nuceria! For Angron!" they bellowed. "For the Emperor!" shouted a political commissar, his chest marked with brand-like tattoos. Lieutenant Rollman, a survivor of the Confederacy, led the charge, a man who had embraced desperate glory and a noble death. "Today we win our redemption," he roared, and his men threw themselves into the fray. Marius wanted to halt them. He wanted to save life wherever he could, but orders came through the comms. "Marius Gage, you are not needed here. Proceed to the 7th deck. A psyker species has manifested. The Warhound's librarians will assist you." He turned without hesitation. Yochuka's defiant roar followed him into the crowd, his power sword and bolter taking down Xeno after Xeno. Marius hoped he would meet this fierce warrior again. "Cargus, how are you doing?" he asked over the comm link. "Utterly boring," Cargus replied flatly. The reply made Marius laugh despite the smoke and blood. "Kid," he added, "after this, drinks." Meanwhile, deeper in the ship, a section of the Redemption's belly hull detonated. Steel plates were torn free into void, conduits sheared, and cables cracked like vipers under strain. Adeptus Mechanicus priests and Skitari moved through the maelstrom. At their head strode Archon Land, Fabricator General of Nuceria. Hull plating peeled away, metal flailing in vacuum. 3 repair teams lost. "Vicious, I do not want to hear lamentations. This is the Omnissiah's will," Lorgar snapped. He looked to the Mechanicus master he had poached from Mars, Vicious, who had consecrated himself to the Omnissiah of Nuceria after learning the planet's truth. Bubbling reverberations of stressed metal and ruptured cabling filled the air. "The 7th deck Seaids must be restored," Lorgar continued. "Those Xenos are assailing the Omnissiah's vessel. This is a holy war." He turned to his fellows. "Know this. That is the Omnissiah's only physical manifestation, its true form. It will lead us to enlightenment through storm and smoke." "Soul to the Colord," one of them intoned. Lorgar repeated the cry with ceremony. Time and conflict moved together. In the engine room, Cargus watched servitors and Mechanicus priests tend the warp engine. The noise was godlike, thunder and steam. He squinted at a squad of warhounds who had entered to support his 13th echelon. "Cargus, echelon captain," a leading lieutenant announced. "By order of the Legion Colord, we are here to support your 13th echelon." Cargus called for his adjutant. The 13th echelon's chief apothecary arrived, flanked by veterans in heavy Terminator armor. Then Cargus acted. "Kill them," he roared, and struck first. His power gauntlet smashed into the leading lieutenant's chest. The figure before him ruptured into something else. A billowing, nebula-like tangle of limbs and swollen flesh, a central black eye that glared with bewilderment. The impact forced it back. Its shape shivered, slipping from man to beast to forms Cargus had never seen. "How did you find us?" the changeling spat, voice sliding between cadences. "We're warhounds," someone snarled. You have the nose of a dog, the changeling sneered, drawing a bone spike that shimmered into a power sword. The weapon's flux and the creature's mutating form piqued Kargas's curiosity only for a heartbeat. He remembered the system AI's orders. Anyone entering the engine room was to be terminated, friend or foe. Even custodians would receive the same treatment. You will fail, humans. You have strayed. We are here to return you to the path, the changeling said with a mocking smile. It was easy to slip in, it went on. Your internal power struggles were the real assist. Before the creature could unhinge minds with its words, cold crept across the floor and frost spread up the changeling's limbs until only its head remained free. A figure in green robes stepped forward. Varys. Varys, didn't you leave with Angron? Someone demanded. Varys smiled, implacable. You Xenos cannot comprehend the Colord's strategy. Enough talk. Kill them! Kargas shouted, and the 13th echelon surged. The remaining changelings split and melted into corners and conduits, trying to hide among machinery, but Kargas was on them. He thrust his gauntlet into another's mass. The false ceramite rippled like water. Bolter rounds from the gauntlet tore through it, reducing flesh and mist to splatter. Humans, a voice screamed. You will fail. Our master will rule. We lurk in shadow. Your Primarchs will fall. You and your yelping mouth, Kargas snapped, kicking a writhing thing across the deck. He turned to Varys, fury in his posture. Varys did not need to speak. He extended his will and with a psychic strike felled one of the creatures outright. Legion Colord, Varys reported into the net. The infiltrators inside the Legion have been identified. They are changelings. Understood, came the calm reply. Their target appears to be Lord Angron. Varys heard the system AI's words and stored them away. He suspected the Colord had more knowledge than it revealed. His mind ran through possibilities. Varys, Angron will not be easy prey, he warned aloud. The system AI seemed to anticipate his concern. Are their targets Angron? Guilliman, sitting on his throne, considered that question with a tightening at his temples. Unit 13. Their target is Angron, and yet not only him. What do you mean? Varys pressed. Their targets include you, your unseen brothers, Fulgrim, Conrad Kurz, and Mortarion as well. System AI left one crucial thing unspoken to Guilliman. They had only one ultimate goal, him, the butcher's nails. A new storm was forming, and the Primarchs were already in the vortex. System AI had once thought the dark gods would draw their tentacles back, but whatever threat the nails represented had proven too great. System AI and the Emperor reached the same brutal conclusion. Either the dark gods of the warp were destroyed, or humanity would survive in ruin. There was no other option. Full speed ahead, Guilliman, let's break through, the voice in his head urged. Get Conrad Kurz ready, Guilliman answered aloud, though his palm tightened on the throne. He could feel the ship, Redemption, was badly hurt. Its systems reported roughly 37% damage and falling. On Lycius, Fulgrim's arrival had been announced long before his Stormbird punched through atmosphere. He had expected ceremony. Instead, he found a world at war. Slaves were rioting planet-wide. The local government was paralyzed. The tech priesthood was at odds with itself, and the armies of the slave masters had already been shattered by rebel forces. To the surviving ruling elite, the Imperium's descent was less invasion than salvation. Fulgrim's amethysted armor and green emerald cloak cast back the light as he stepped down and regarded the trembling elderly slave master who had been sent to greet him. He looked like a myth made flesh, elegant, imperious, entirely without haste. I am pleased you are willing to submit to the Imperium, Fulgrim said, voice cultured and slow. I admit I am not fully informed of your internal troubles, but I see you cling to us as to a last hope. The slave master smiled thinly. Yes, great envoy, we accept the Imperium's pacification. We will fight beside you. Fulgrim's lips tightened. Submit to us, or be destroyed. You choose. The old man sank to his knees, the facade gone. Fulgrim looked down like a god at an insect and gave a short, mirthless laugh. For a moment, he let the humiliation hang in the air. Then something snapped across the landing pad. You sound like an animal in heat, Mortarion said quietly, and Fulgrim turned with a flash of annoyance. Mortarion's interruption ruined his performance. Before he could recover, a power sword leapt. The slave master's head sailed from his shoulders. The landing pad froze. Fulgrim's shriek of outrage echoed against the hull. Fire! Someone shouted. Gel, Angron's scion and a warhound, had already drawn a bolter and began sweeping the distant guards with bolts of killing light. Fulgrim blinked at the carnage, stunned that these wrathful brothers would spoil his diplomatic theater. "This is not liberation," he snapped, furious. "They were oppressors," Angron said quietly, as though stating a fact. He watched the spectacle with the calm of a man used to blood and spectacle. Gel stooped, ripped off the last mortal's head, and flung it at Fulgrim's feet. "You may speak to me of anything," Gel said coldly. "I am now in charge of the warhounds." "I gave the order, and I killed the man," he added, voice empty of deference. Fulgrim's face hardened. "What would the nail say if it saw this?" he demanded, mockery and challenge braided together. Angron only smiled, a tired, contemptuous thing. The nail would say, "Well killed." Fulgrim stared. For all his polish, he had never truly known the nail's logic. Angron had. The man who had worn the nails longest could only sneer at Fulgrim's attempt at propriety. "Brother Fulgrim," Angron added, shifting his tone, "our latest intelligence shows a Korax among the rebels. He may be one of our own. Why not let you find him?" Fulgrim inclined his head, losing none of his grandeur even as he acknowledged the command. "Edmund, go contact these rebels. See if we can parley." Angron's next words were businesslike. "Do not interfere with my work." Fulgrim held his pride but smiled thinly. "As you wish. Gel, seize government control. Mobilize everything we can." "We are not the arsonists," Angron said softly, voice drowned by the whine of engines. "Their leader has already emerged from the shadows. Find the remaining slave masters. Have them await my brother's arrival." Gel grinned as he accepted the command and melted away with his retinue. Angron looked up at Lycius's bruised sky, unreadable in expression. Below, the planet burned with revolution. Above, the Primarchs had other plans. On Redemption, alarms screamed and the bridge quivered under enemy fire. Guilliman sat in his command seat while reports cascaded across the holoscreens. The Warhound's crew were under siege, and yet, unnervingly, their voices were calm, almost casual. Even in the midst of engagement, Lothara Salin and the others spoke as if at a drill, their tones unnaturally steady. "We are entangled," the Nail reported. Nearly 30 Xenos vessels had latched onto Redemption. 4 other ships had survived only because their commanders had obeyed orders to peel off. One of those ships, Wismund, was falling behind. "Wismund is too slow. Its engines are done for," the system AI said. "We must either abandon her or transfer her people to Redemption." Casselot's face flickered onto Guilliman's view. "His Highness Guilliman, Wismund has been overwhelmed by Xeno's boarding actions. The 15th Legion is holding her to give you, Father, an opportunity to rendezvous with His Highness Conrad Kurds." Guilliman's chest tightened. Nearly 2,000 Ultramarines still fought on Wismund. In space, even the bravest warriors could be tipped into the abyss in an instant. "Casselot," he said finally, voice thin with the weight of impossible choices, "hold the Xenos ships behind us. If you can buy us time, it raises the chance of success by 11%. The Nail's cold appraisal, numbers and probabilities, settled over him like a tarp. Guilliman, who measured outcomes with the precision of a strategist, understood the calculus and accepted it. "Casselot, block the pursuing ships," he repeated. Then he turned to other officers. "Lothara Salin, prep 10 Stormbirds. If that's not enough, strip them from other ships. Lorgar, ready the newest gunships." He felt the ship lean into his will, even wounded. "Lothara, you must hold your ground and help us blunt the enemy behind us." A hush fell across the bridge, the kind that gathers before a charge. Then the system AI broadcast through the ship, voice bright and utterly unsentimental. "Let's go, Unit 13. Go save Private Karloff." Guilliman stared at the readouts, incredulous for a heartbeat, then set his jaw. The Empire demanded ruthlessness and precision. Its commanders had to give both. The plan was ugly and dangerous, and it was all they had. "What are you doubting?" The Nail's voice cut through his helmet. Guilliman felt the machine's tone, undeniable this time. He answered the thought in his head before he could stop it. "This is a machine. I am not your father." The Nail replied, almost apologetic in its logic. "I cannot lavish attention on individuals when the whole matters. I seize only the present moment. War is data, for me, merciless and precise." Angron, Unit 2 can be impulsive. Unit 13, it is acceptable to be moved by emotion. As for success rates, to hell with them. Gilliman's lips twitched into a rare, slight smile. He had never felt so comforted by the nail's brusque frankness. He rose and, escorted by the victors, left the bridge for the landing pad. "Get moving, Khorne. Take a few good men and follow me. Varys handles things over there. See you at the pad." As the officers fell into formation, Angron's voice crackled across the comms, familiar, ferocious. "Does Angron get impulsive often?" There was a teasing reply from somewhere else. "There have been far more times I've had to clean up his messes." The two of them jabbed one another on the way, and somewhere in the distance, Angron sneezed in offended fury. Khorne was already at the pad with a dozen warriors, talking quietly with Gilliman's deputy, Gage. When Gilliman approached, his golden mask catching the light, the men fell to salute. He inclined his head and boarded the Stormbird. Below his feet, a gargantuan shape unfolded its wings, the Ultramarine, Nuceria's experimental super-heavy transport gunship. It was an ungainly behemoth, raw in design, christened in honor of Nuceria's friendship with the 500 worlds. The technology was unrefined. The field trial of this battle would make it far more mature. Gilliman thought of investment, of Lorgar bringing that tech to the 500 worlds when it was time. 10 gunships rose from the pad, escorted by a dozen fighters. Space around them was a ruin of wreckage, splintered alien hulls, and the smoking remains of a handful of imperial craft. "Karloff, we'll reach the Wismend in 10 minutes, Gilliman sent. Silence answered him. Karloff did not reply. A premonition tightened Gilliman's chest. "Enemy aircraft incoming, hold tight." The Stormbird shuddered as a shockwave slammed past, shells detonating near the formation. The first Stormbird, in a broken, awkward descent, slammed into the Wismand's landing pad. Explosives and ordnance began to fall across the deck where the Xenos massed. Hatches spat open. The Warhounds and Ultramarines poured out, attempting to clear the pad, but the Xenos' numbers and heavy weapons pinned them back. The Stormbird's shields flashed and began to writhe under impact. A blue figure burst from a hatch like a bolt of lightning, a blur that sliced dozens into halves. Gilliman grabbed the short sword in his hand, raised a World Eater's pattern plasma gun, and fired. The recoil threw him against the decking. A gout of red-hot slag spattered where the shot struck. He staggered back, feeling the violent kick the nail had warned him about. "Are you sure this isn't a ship-mounted weapon?" he thought aloud, shaking the plasma gun free and using the hilt of his sword to send a Xeno's head flying. No wonder. A normal space marine would have been embedded in bulkhead. "Stop thinking useless things," the nail murmured. "Karloff is on the bridge. I am invading the system here. Those lads are besieged. Hurry, Unit 13. Gilliman charged. Throngs of Xenos surged to meet him. Bolter fire rattled like a roll of thunder. He raised his arm, the shield flickering a ring, then drove forward. He caught a missile grazing past his helm. The blast carved a hole into the deck behind him. If it had struck his chest, he tilted his head, just as the nail had suggested, and the danger passed. That thought was scarcely born before he cut another swath of death, zigzagging through the enemy. Xenos tried to roar him down. He answered with bolter and blade. When his bolter's magazine emptied, he cast it aside, using the falling carcass of a Xeno as a shield, and charged headlong, shredding half a dozen foes in seconds. To the alien horde, Gilliman was monstrous, an indestructible juggernaut who closed with them under fire and still broke their lines. One Xeno stepped out of a breached bulkhead with a severed ultramarine draped from its claw, stomping the body in mockery as it raised a light sword. Rage lit Gilliman's chest like wildfire. He deflected the blade with the short sword's hilt, seized the Xeno's elbow, and with a twist tore the limb free. He clubbed its head with the arm, then drove the short blade through its abdomen. Before finishing the thing, Gilliman plucked a grenade from the corpse's belt and threw it into the ranks. Khorne and Gage fought at his flanks, carving a corridor as Gilliman retrieved his power sword and grabbed another bolter. The bolter thundered. Holes blossomed in distant Xenos as smoke curled from their wounds. A thrill of grim satisfaction shot through him. Whenever the Blue Reaper appeared, an impossible afterimage, time itself seemed to hesitate. It slammed aliens to the deck like a merciless hammer. The sight of it stole morale from the Xenos. Where it fell, those creatures died as if in auctions of fate. They surged into a great hall further within the Wismand, a cathedral of desecration. What should have been a place of honor was a carnival of blasphemy, sacrilegious graffiti, altar-like contraptions, ultramarine bodies displayed in torment. Guilliman's heart tightened. The Xenos held up the torn remains of his scions like trophies. A half-living child lay broken and weeping at the edge of the hall. The Primarch's restraint snapped. He planted his gauntleted hands into the steel deck, muscles contracting until a plate peeled free. Gripping the torn floor slab, he lifted it and bore it forward like a living battering ram. "Father." Castellot's voice, a choked, desperate transmission, hit Guilliman through the comms. Guilliman felt the word like a blade through his chest. He could not, would not, let them die in vain. Power boots slammed. Guilliman roared and forced the heavy slab through the ranks. Xenos were crushed, pulverized, smashed as though they were flies beneath a god's palm. Blood splattered the golden mask and ran down his powered armor. He swallowed his grief and let fury do what sorrow would not permit. "You bastards," he bellowed. "Unit 13, kill them, scum, show me your faces." There was nothing measured left in him in that center of battle, only a father, raw and howling at the slaughter of his children. Around him, blood made little streams along the deck. When the last Xeno fell, he raised himself and strained ears to the feed again. The bridge was lost in a haze of psychic interference. Castellot's life sign flared faintly, barely clinging. If they did not move now, his chances were nil. "Retreat?" the nail asked, strangely soft. Guilliman straightened, sorrow tempered by hard resolve. "Retreat? Unit 13, you are a man, not a machine. We will take these young men home. We will not leave them to die." He turned to Gage. "Everyone, to the landing pad. Gather the survivors. Come, we take our brothers home." They pushed forward, even knowing the route ahead was likely a snare. The golden mask gleamed as Guilliman and his two companions, Gage, the ultramarine Archon, and Khorne of the Warhounds, made for the bridge. Half the way, the short sword in his hand had become a chainsword, teeth chewing at the air. The corridor into the bridge was littered with corpses, Xenos and brothers alike, and painted with blasphemous runes. At the threshold, a psychic pressure grimed the light. "This place is sealed by the warp," the nail said. The air tasted wrong. It was not wholly of the real universe. Guilliman forced the door. Inside, the bridge was a tableau of agony. Karloff knelt at the center, head bowed, not breathing. Around him, blasphemous drawings crawled across consoles and the floor. Every symbol seemed to gnaw at Guilliman's mind. As Gage and Khorne stepped in, some unseen force slammed the bridge door shut behind them, sealing them in. "Unit 13, this is a trap," the nail warned. "The warp has already encroached." "I know," Guilliman said, steady despite the dread. He had felt the hate at the doorway. Yet he trusted the nail as Angron trusted it, inexorably. The machine had ways to extract them. It always had. System scans swept the space with a thin, metallic keening. Khorne looked at the broken chainsword in his hands and, with a grim snort, flung it to the deck. Gage watched, then removed his own chainsword and handed it to Khorne. "What will you use?" Khorne asked as he took it. "This," Gage replied, and raised another blade. Gage raised his power fist at Khorne. By then, Guilliman had reached his chapter brother, Castellot, who was kneeling on the deck, his face twisted in agony. The Xeno had been torturing him. Castellot's eyes had not closed. Guilliman reached out. As he was about to close them, Castellot suddenly seized his arm. "Why didn't you save me?" The voice echoed in Guilliman's head. Guilliman's reply was flat, almost mechanical. "I'm sorry, Castellot." It was an apology without guilt, and it did nothing to calm the thing still clinging to life. Castellot pushed himself upright, empty eyes fixed on Guilliman. Father, leave here." "This is a trap," he bellowed, a final flare of fury and loyalty tearing out of him. A new voice snapped through their minds, contemptuous, amused. How talkative. Something unseen, System A, slipped a tendril of data into Castellot's skull. Castellot made an incoherent cry as the intruder probed. Guilliman gathered the broken warrior to his waist. A blue radiance sprang up around them and spread outward. The fallen sons of Guilliman flared into being like ghosts reborn, their bodies weapon-burned from within. The mortal crew had fought until the last breath. Across the bridge stood a monstrous Xeno unlike any they had faced. Its brain shone faintly blue, cradled within a transparent dome of glass. Around a towering central figure, a dozen guards gripped scepters and waited. The loudspeaker crackled with a cool, condescending voice. We need not be enemies. Under the stars, we are but instruments of the great gods. Why do you attack us and bar us from this pilgrimage? A pilgrimage. The word sent a cold edge through Gilliman. He looked up at the creature. Your kind has drifted in the warp for too long, ghosts of the past echoing into the present. Those who stop us will be crushed. The Xeno's tone remained patient. Imperial demigod, I will not persuade you to serve us. I only ask that you not interfere. We are lambs fed by our gods, another voice added, a whisper of temptation. Gilliman leveled his short sword at the Xeno. I will send your so-called gods to hell along with you. The alien laughed. Young demigod, will you serve a solitary god to claim the throne of the warp? Will you sacrifice your entire species for it? Is the cost worth it? Falsehood and seduction leaked from the creature's words, but Gilliman's will did not waver. He launched himself forward. Khorne and Gage followed. Spatial ripples hissed into being. Psychic bonds tried to hold Gilliman in place. He could move only slowly, still enough, though, to throw his short blade. It sang through the air and struck a guard's weapon with a ringing clatter. Think, demigod, the alien mocked. You and your brothers, mere products of a workshop. Are you even truly human? Nothing but a tool for your creator's divinity. Gilliman twisted aside and forced the first step forward. You are deceived. I will tear your lies away and show you the truth. The Xeno's voice invaded his mind with images and whispers, an attempt to drown him in illusion. At that moment, a calm, alien voice cut in. Unit 13, I'll take it from here. Okay. Gilliman found himself suddenly watching his own body from outside, an artificial perspective settling over him. A translucent interface hovered before him, status readouts, a couch and a table piled with objects that shimmered like feelings. Around him stood figures he knew too well, the warriors of the 15th chapter. Castellot knelt again, this time genuinely contrite. I'm sorry, Father, he said, shame and relief tangled in his words. He had failed his mission and delayed the Imperial demigod's plan. Gilliman laid a hand on his shoulder. You've done well, Castellot. Did the nail save you? Gilliman asked. Yes, Castellot answered. The nail pulled me from the Xeno. I will join the Warhounds. They said I would aid Khorne of the 13th echelon. Khorne is a warrior worthy of respect, Gilliman said, smiling faintly as he took Castellot's hand. You fought to the end and did not dishonor the 13th. Now let us see how the nail avenges you. A line of system messages flickered into view. Pilot connecting. Pilot online. Unit 13 body status nominal. Synchronization rate 70%. Unit 13 bowed his head. When he lifted it again, the mask on Gilliman's face seemed to undulate like rippling water. He stepped forward, voice freshly smooth and cold. Do I look like a man or a god to you? A silent, physical power streamed from him and crushed the surrounding psychic resonance. That was the law of pure, brute reality. The psyker's eyes widened with sudden recognition. Rippler of destiny, he hissed. The gods have been seen through. You cannot change destiny. You will only invite greater horrors. Fear, the alien roared, trying to press its will. Anti-psychic module activated. Do not be afraid, Unit 13 said, laughing in a way that was more a blade than a joke. His smile carried a contempt that seeded terror in the psyker's heart. The Xeno battered the demigod's body with psychic force, shredding and screaming to tear him apart, but Unit 13 moved as if the warp itself had no purchase on him. System AI met the assault head-on. I will not deny the Emperor's mad plan, System AI declared inwardly. The burden of leadership and sacrifice is a thing only the Emperor truly understood, and one System AI would not shirk. So go on, you fool, take your price. With that, Unit 13 tore through the nearest guard. He wrenched the scepter from a staggered sentry and drove it into another's skull. Khorne and Gage flanked him, each locking blades with a psyker guard and buying space. Can your gods be harmed? Can they feel fear? Can they die? Unit 13 shouted, his voice full of a young, arrogant pride the system had inherited. Blasphemy! Rings of hot, blistering flames sprung up around the main psyker as he tried to consume Unit 13 in fire. The demigod found the alien's desperation laughable. Without using any warp-framed powers, he let a wave of red, raw, feral emotion lash into the psyker's mind. The creature shrieked as each thought in its skull ignited. Pain tore it open. It screamed helplessly. You and your gods are ridiculous, Unit 13 barked. Tell them that the future of humanity is not theirs to claim. No matter what schemes they weave, the Emperor and I are here to meet them. There is no place for you in this universe. He strode forward, the flames snuffed out around him, as if his presence demanded it. The Psyker's vaunted psychic defenses crumbled under the simple, physical brutality of Unit 13. He punched through the glass visor and seized the alien brain, ripping it free. He tossed it to the deck and crushed it beneath his power boot. Even with that death, the warp's corruption clung to the bridge. Unit 13 inhaled, sensing that the trap had not been dispelled. They wanted to keep him here. Khorne and Gage finished clearing their opponents and turned to him. Unit 13 met their eyes. Calm, amused. Khorne, he said, the first lesson I give you, how to escape a trap. Black, bitter emotion welled from him. The Psyker had used his own power to forge the cage. That very same power was now the key to breaking it. Mirrors shattered in 1,000 places, and the ship's false, warp-twisted visage began to peel away. The hollow apparitions and the monsters the warp had birthed were exposed. Unit 13 prodded them back with shards of his red fury. They fled, howling and swearing. System chime. Redemption engine activated. Estimated arrival in 1 minute. No one, Guilliman included, believed it at first. Leave this place in a minute? The idea was absurd. Put on your helmets, Unit 13 ordered. Section 147. The system AI's warning was precise and clinical. When it finished, the nail turned its attention to Gage and Khorne, and then smashed the bridge glass in front of them. The sudden rush of decompression snatched all three out into space. Oh, maybe I miscalculated. We'll be back in 47 seconds, the nail intoned. 3 thuds echoed across Redemption's deck as the trio skidded along steel and slammed against the observation glass. Lothara Salin watched them slide and, amused, killed the engines. That looked painful, she said. She was joking, but only because only an imperial demigod or a space marine could survive something like that. An ordinary mortal attempting such a stunt would already be a corpse. Prepare an operating theater for me, Guilliman ordered. As you command, Legion Co-Lord, Lothara replied immediately. Apothecary Cargus is waiting in the theater. Guilliman rubbed at his neck. His organs felt as if they had been rearranged. Gage and Khorne were intact. The nail's protection had held them, but he had taken the worst of it. He could feel the lingering bruises of vacuum exposure and the way his insides had shifted. He fought for a steady breath as they moved down the corridor. Conrad Kurz has led the fleet to engage the Xenos on the second line of defense, the nail reported. I am relieved he is there, but he cannot intercept all of them. It's bad enough, Guilliman said, but why do we need an operating theater? I must place Casselot on Karn's head, the nail replied. Guilliman stopped and touched his helm, a wry tremor in his voice. The implication was startlingly intimate and blasphemous to some. He still remembered how astonished he had been when he first learned that the nail could extract a man's soul or data. If the 500 worlds had paid any price to obtain such a device, it would have been worth it 1,000 times over. The thought of it falling into Xenos' hands made Guilliman's jaw tighten. Don't read too much into it, the nail said quickly, as if anticipating his thought. I do not seek to wrest power from the Emperor. Did you hear what the Xenos said earlier? Guilliman asked. Partially, the nail answered. Then its tone changed, sober, almost conspiratorial. Guilliman, Unit 13, you will answer me. Guilliman frowned. What is it? There is something you must understand, the nail said. The Emperor's essence is wild and obstinate. He does not desire to be a god, yet he is humanity's only guide. He is cold and ruthless, but he keeps a paternal concern for you, subtle, not ostentatious. Guilliman sensed a deeper meaning behind those words. Explain plainly. Humanity's circumstances are grimmer than you think, the nail continued. If the Emperor should lose contact, or worse, if something happens on Terra, I need you to establish a new government for the 500 worlds. Guilliman halted, as if struck. The suggestion was treasonous in the extreme, and he stood silent, weighing every implication. Will it be that bad? He finally managed. Worse than you imagine. Our enemies are not merely material. The Emperor and I are prepared for sacrifice. Are you? The nail asked. Guilliman felt the weight of the question. This is as if you were entrusting a child. Does Angron know? You must understand, your brothers consider you ambitious, but to the Emperor and to me, you are the last bulwark of the Imperium, the nail answered. Some truths are premature for you. Corruption exists everywhere, even among the great Primarchs. To the Emperor and me, you are both a tool and an awkward apprentice. Before our two greatest instruments are spent, it is not yet time for you to inherit our mantle. Guilliman glanced around to ensure privacy and signaled Gage and Khorne to step back. I have a question. I do not know whether to ask it. Speak, Unit 13, the nail replied. After the war, what becomes of us? Guilliman asked openly, the question that haunted every Primarch and their scions. When the Great Crusade ends, when there is no more war, what purpose would they serve? Would they be purged like the Thunder Warriors? The nail's answer was blunt. War endures. Have you ever seen a fool disband his army? Guilliman paused, then the nail offered an aside. Archon Gel of the Warhounds, do you not find his physique different from the other Space Marines? Guilliman's eyes brightened with recognition. You mean? He is descended from the Thunder Warriors. The nail confirmed. The Emperor cannot be distracted with internal matters, the nail went on. Whether it is the Father or Malcador, they are occupied with things I will not name. I will, however, manage what I can. The entities that now oppose us already perceive me as a thorn. In the future, Angron will be your staunchest ally. Guilliman digested that, stunned by the sense of an entrusted responsibility. Do we still have time? This is a race, the nail said. No one knows whom time favors. Do you accept our compact? Guilliman's stern face softened beneath his helm, and he allowed himself a brief, almost private smile. Do not worry for your father. Even if he knows, he will smile with relief. Is this to be our secret? The nail asked. For now, Guilliman agreed. He looked toward the operating theater's open door. Khorne, lie down. Castellot's learning time is short. I'll have Eris continue his instruction. You mean teach him on an Ultramar? The nail objected. Only the Warhounds and a handful of others can absorb the emotions around them, Guilliman said. That is why I did not tell you sooner. We will need warriors who carry nails. There are very few Warhounds with nails now, the nail replied. Most of those who have them are squad leaders across the legions. If we spread them thin across the 500 worlds, what will remain? You are ambitious, Master Guilliman. Guilliman watched as Khorne was sedated with Nucerian anesthetic and placed on the operating table. Regret flickered across his face, but duty steeled him. As the data synapse entered Khorne's mind and the metal construct closed around his head, Guilliman felt the familiar presence settle into the device. A return. Welcome back, Castellot, he murmured. Section break. You were happy too soon. Fulgrim tapped the metal arm of his chair and stared toward the distant doorway as if expecting someone. He had offered sincerity. The Phoenix Guards stood at attention around him, weapons ready for the arrival of the rebel leader. The ruling elite of this world had been slaughtered by Angron. Oppressors and slave masters were now hung aloft upon the Black Tower in the city. Archon Gel had hastily set up a transitional governing council composed of Nucerians and Nostramans. The abrupt change left the rebels uncertain. Were these new rulers themselves oppressors or benevolent saviors from beyond the stars? Corax had hesitated about meeting the head of the new regime. When food and new policies began to make their way down to the common folk, Corax realized he had to see them with his own eyes. Fulgrim, meanwhile, simply waited, cup of tea in hand, head propped expectantly. A voice cut through the air. You called for me. Fulgrim jumped, like a startled cat. The Phoenix Guards swiveled, aimed their weapons at a figure who had just stepped into the chamber. Corax stood there, grimy and folded with his arms, a hard line to his jaw. The first impression he gave was not flattering. The shadow of Conrad Kurtze seemed to cling to him. Where did you come from? Fulgrim asked. From places you'd be better off not knowing, Corax replied coldly. The lavish trappings around Fulgrim made Corax visibly uneasy. He had no fondness for pomp. I am Fulgrim, the peacock declared by way of introducing himself. Corax, came the clipped answer, after a moment's hesitation. Fulgrim offered the scattered tea and pastries on the table with an awkward smile. Have some. Corax eyed the refreshments with suspicion. I'm afraid you've poisoned it, he said dryly. Fulgrim choked at the remark, unable to tell whether it was jest or a deadly slur. I'm here to negotiate, Corax said. What policies have you put in place? Fulgrim started to answer, only to be interrupted by another voice. Angron's, booming and rough. Fulgrim turned to see Angron pushed forward by Gel, Mortarion at his side like an ominous escort. I am Angron. This is Mortarion. And that clown is Fulgrim, Angron announced with a grin. Fulgrim bristled and stepped between Angron and the others, pointing a finger in the warlord's face. You've not seen how many people want to strike you, he snapped. Angron's presence had an almost magnetic effect on the room. A dozen memories of past offenses flickered across Fulgrim's features, and he withdrew his hand, chastened. Corax watched the little theater of brothers with a distant, unreadable expression, seeing little of the point in their display. Then a voice cut into the tension. Lycius, this is your world. The name hung there, a reminder of the many hands that now strangled the fate of a struggling planet. Angron came before Corax in a wheelchair, staring at his dark-haired brother. I apologize for taking it upon myself to kill those slave masters, he said. I was once a slave. I cannot tolerate that filth. If you still want to take revenge, we can fight when I recover. I don't mind, Corax answered. I'm glad to have a like-minded brother. Corax felt no malice in Angron at all. In that moment, Angron seemed not like a warlord, but a sickly, gentle elder brother, simply family. You're celebrating too soon, Corax, Angron said. The next words froze the smile on Corax's face. A Xenos fleet is coming in from space toward this world. The warp storm is keeping the Imperial fleet from getting here quickly. 2 of our brothers are holding them back in orbit, but we are outnumbered. Corax. Angron looked at the man he had met under such dramatic circumstances. You are the planetary governor now. I have done enough for you. Mortarion, Fulgrim, teach our brother how to be a proper leader. Gel, put the authority in Prince Corax's hands. Hurry him to the governor's palace to sign the documents. Let the rebels learn, and then take over the positions of our own men. Angron pressed a badge onto Corax's chest. A troop of clerks, white-faced and terrified, rushed forward with carts piled high with papers. Wait, I came here to negotiate, Corax protested. Negotiate? There's nothing to negotiate. You're the governor now, my brother. Get to work. Angron's disdain was plain. He obviously expected Corax to govern. Elsewhere, a battlefield of a different sort was unfolding. A scout craft reversed. Sevatar had boarded a Xenos vessel. Every Imperial ship in the region faced overwhelming numbers, and even so the Night Lords could not intercept them all. Conrad Kurz had thrown most of his legion off the main fighting vessels, leaving only a handful of Iron Warriors aboard the Nightfall. He knew the Night Lords were not built for space warfare. For the first time, Kurz complained bitterly about being the primary force. Gilliman, 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 he barked into the comms, pressing the channel until his ship shook. Xenos were already infesting his decks. The survivors, mortals and the few Iron Warriors, scrabbled to throw them off as the ship's weapons hammered the void. Then Kurz blinked and, for an instant, saw a vision that closed his eyes and opened them to treacherous colors and a buried seed. He could not tell who it targeted, Mortarion, Angron, Gilliman, himself, or something else. At least a third of the enemy fleet is headed for Lycius, came the reply. There are too many of these bastards. We still have a large group behind us. I'll try to gather them. One officer glanced at the Redemption, which was limping along at only 60% of normal speed. Hang in there, brother, he thought. I'll see you re-equipped after this. For now, the Redemption had to trust the machine spirit and whatever engines remained. Back on Lycius, Gel pushed Angron along the corridor of the Black Tower, the tallest spire in Hive City. Angron squinted, turning his head. How is my brother Corax doing? He asked. Gel hesitated, then tried to praise Corax as best he could. Not bad, he said. Not bad? Angron arched an eyebrow. Was Corax's administration so lacking? Angron smirked at the thought. He had secretly kept Corax to minor administrative tasks, and it seemed Corax was not particularly enthusiastic about them. As Angron laughed, a chill ran down his spine. Gel, did you feel that? He asked. Gel nodded. Hypnos had warned him of a strange presence approaching, beings that looked human, but whose malice exceeded any human range. Angron waved the thought away and continued. I've heard rumors in the Legion, Angron said suddenly. Rumors? Gel asked, puzzled. The rumor about little Angron. Gel's face did not change. He had heard. He felt no malice from his father, and he kept pushing Angron along, the redemption guard at their backs. Oedipus led the ninth echelon out, axe in hand, staring down the rats hiding in the dark corners. On board the ship, he had already sensed the malice with the assistance of Phoenix. He stood ready, blood-red axe gripped, waiting for Angron's command. "Yes, my father. People call me Little Angron," Gel said with a chuckle. Among the Luna wolves there was a little Horus. To Gel, it was an odd sort of honor. "What's so wrong with Little Angron?" Angron twisted his neck in irritation. "That term might apply to everyone in the Warhounds, but you are just one man. Change it. It makes me sound like a slave master." "It's an honorific in other legions," Gel protested. "Nonsense. You are you, and I am me. Little Angron? Foolish. I treat all my sons equally, no favoritism." They bickered like fathers and sons. The Warhounds were less complicated internally than other legions. Terran-born and Nucerian scions lived together in surprising harmony. "Go, my son Regent Gel," Angron finally said. "If you seek a title, how about Honored Archon?" "Father, just call me Gel," he replied. "The other titles feel strange." Angron laughed. "Sons of Angron, slaughter the Xenos that snuck in and bring us victory." At Angron's command, Oedipus and the ninth echelon moved like a storm. The changelings who thought themselves hidden felt the Warhound's gaze and froze. "Xenos, we have come for you." Angron's cry carried the weight of violence and authority. Oedipus swung his great axe, dragging a rat from the shadows and smashing it as if it were straw. The ninth echelon set the remains ablaze. "Xenos," Oedipus roared, fury squeezing the word from his chest. He cleaved through those who tried to breach the line. Changelings tried arcane tricks to slip past them, but Oedipus's bolter barked, and his axe found its mark. When one changeling, taking the form of a brother, knelt and wailed, Oedipus kicked it aside and shattered its core. A patient presence watched from the dark, one wiser and craftier than the others. It had survived earlier encounters, hiding behind psychic cloaks. Gel pushed Angron forward and spotted the hunter's lair. The creature lunged, a sharp weapon aimed for Angron's chest. Its face shifted constantly. It believed itself certain to succeed. Gel moved without hesitation. He drew his power sword, parried the thrust, and pressed his bolter to the Xeno's torso. Flames erupted as the bolter fired. "I really don't recommend Oedipus as Archon of the Warhounds. He's too reckless," Gel said later with a dry remark. "You're right, Regent Gel, you can keep doing it for 10,000 years. If not, let Khorne." Oedipus roared from the distance, all bravado. Gel watched as Oedipus tore the last Xenos apart by hand. He knelt before Angron and activated the comm. "Father, Prince Mortarion is on the channel." A projection of Mortarion appeared. "Angron, were you assassinated?" "It's nothing, brother, just some small rats." "The enemy fleet has reached orbit. Conrad Kurtzy failed to stop them. I need manpower. I will send Oedipus and the ninth echelon to assist. The Nuceria Solar Auxiliaries will fight alongside them." "Why not send Gel?" Mortarion asked. "I want Oedipus to get some practice," Angron replied. Mortarion's reasoning remained opaque to Angron. Why not send a proven commander? But orders were orders. As they spoke, Angron looked out the window and saw drop pods streaking down from the sky. A new war had begun. Elsewhere across the city, a Nucerian general watched the fall of the pods, raised his chainsword, and turned to the men around him. "Loyal humans of the Imperium, our mission is to hold this defensive zone, fight alongside the Space Marines and the Emperor's children. This is an honor for Prince Angron, for the co-lord of our legion." The general's voice drove them forward. Artillery shook the ground as the Xenos pressed to breach the defenses. Force shields flickered to life as the priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus worked to restore old, damaged generators. Gel himself had played a crucial role in galvanizing those efforts. The city braced as the first waves hit, and the Warhounds answered the call with steel and fury. The enemy massed beneath the walls, rolling siege towers forward one by one. The blasphemous howls of the Xenos and the churning black tide on the ground filled the defenders with a living dread. Beneath the Black Gate, an entire company of Death Guard had formed up, Mortarion himself at the front. "Typhon." Mortarion looked to the captain at his side. "Present," Typhon answered, cleaning his bolter. "Protect yourself," Mortarion said. "If I fall, you take command." Typhon hesitated, trying to sound light. "You expect you'll die before me? That's not funny." "Then you command later," Mortarion replied flatly. Typhon frowned. Lately, Mortarion had been acting strange, as if weighed by some secret they shared, but did not speak of. The Xenos horns sounded. The gate yawned open. Mortarion watched as the enemy began to file out in orderly ranks, silent warriors with countless scythes ready to harvest the field. As if summoned to meet them, the gunships rose, and the transport's engines began to vibrate. "We attack!" Mortarion ordered. In the War Council room, a holographic projection of the battlefield climbed into the air. Gel watched it and breathed out. Fulgrim stood with his arms folded, watching Gel with curious amusement. Angron and Mortarion had both backed Gel as field commander. A cadre of Warhound's librarians stood ready nearby. "Too few men, weak troops," Gel muttered. Fulgrim raised an eyebrow. "Are your scions capable?" Angron rolled his eyes and shot back. "Probably a bit stronger than yours." Fulgrim shook his head. The Warhound's contempt only made Angron grin. A librarian stepped forward and began using a small psychic ward to keep Gel steady. The power on the commander's brow was obvious to those who knew how to look. Orders poured out through the room. "Titan legions, stand by. Night houses, heed my command. Gunship squadrons, take off. Your primary mission is to escort the transports. Red Dogs, prepare ground weapons fire. Knights of Dawn's arrival, hold in orbit and intercept the Xenos fleet." Gel's voice carried through the network. Outside, the Death Guard surged beyond the Black Gate. It was a different method of assault than the Warhounds favored, but it meshed with their plan. City artillery and wall batteries opened on the enemy as the Death Guard advanced. Mortals on the parapets took up rifles and aimed down alongside the Space Marines. Bombardments pounded the Xenos lines. Every shot toppled a vehicle. The Death Guard pressed forward into the storm of fire. When the black tide met the green, the sky answered. Gunships unleashed a storm of ordnance above the enemy. Mortarion hacked through Xenos like wheat with his scythe, and from his place on the line, watched swarms of Xenos shredded by the strikes above. Elation thrummed through him, the brutality of coordinated firepower, the satisfaction of perfect killing. A Nuceria auxiliary force fought in concert with the Death Guard. The Mortals' beam rifles punched holes clean through charging infantry. Mortarion noticed their weapons differed from the designs he knew, but they were effective. The Xenos, despite greater numbers of men and machines, were bewildered. They could not suppress the Imperial fire. Their infantry were harvested in waves. An artillery group pushed forward, and, in the next instant, a weapon beam fell from the sky and turned them into glass. The Xenos commander watched, helpless, his guns vaporized. Where were their fleet and its support? Mortarion upended a Xenos tank with a single blow, kicking it so it toppled and crushed dozens of creatures as it flew. The surrounding aliens roared at his inhuman strength, until aerial shells turned them into screaming wreckage. The anti-air emplacements on the walls, guided and adjusted by tech priests, cut swathes through the enemy craft. In short order, they had accounted for over 200 fighters. In the command suite, Fulgrim and Corax exchanged astonished looks at Gel's orders. "My brother," Corax murmured, "I haven't been formally trained for this." "Is this how wars are fought?" Fulgrim asked. Neither man could suppress a wry twitch. The efficiency of Gel's control was not natural. Fulgrim's eyes landed on the little nail embedded in Gel's brow, and he found his answer. There was power there, but dampened, controlled. A nearby librarian channeled a cooling compulsion through the commander to steady him. Angron scowled at his two astonished brothers and muttered, "Two bumpkins." The Xenos fleet descended. Red Dog's observation reported it instantaneously to Archon Gel. A small hive city had already fallen, an ominous sign. But worse, monstrous titans and warped knights were forming in the enemy center. These were not the clean, armored behemoths of man. They were sheathed in flesh, the hulls fused with tumor and sinew, knights with living growths clinging to their frames. Hypnos glanced at Gel. "Deploy the Titan legions?" "Without them, what are our chances?" Gel asked. 80%, came the cold reply. "Enough. Deploy the Shadow Sword and Angron's great axes," Gel ordered. "Knights of the Tyrannus household, destroy those Xenos constructs." Transports threw down Angron's great axes into the fray, one touching down almost at Mortarion's feet. Amid the guns and explosions, Mortarion crushed a Xenos into a ragged pulp and vaulted onto the hull of the towering war engine, denting blue and white plating with his weight. "Lord Mortarion," the pilot hailed over the Vox. "We are moving to strike the enemy Titan." "Then go," Mortarion replied. He had seen such war machines once before against psyker behemoths and admired the raw, destructive poetry of them. The engines roared until the whole ground seemed to vibrate. Mortarion felt it in every cell. More of Angron's great axes took the field, their steel torrents driving through the enemy. Mortarion drew his lantern and fired short, brutal bursts at anything that tried to slow their advance. Turrets mounted on the great axe's prow chewed up Xenos that crowded its path. "Gel to all," a crisp voice cut through. "First orbital and aerial strikes inbound in 60 seconds. I will weaken the Xenos Titan's shields. Titan killers, one shot only." Communication terminated. Brief, but it steadied everyone like a hand on a shoulder. Mortarion looked past the great axe toward the towering, corrupted Titan and the aerial scraps over it. A Xenos Knight, its whip made of living tissue, charged with murderous speed right for Mortarion. Before it could strike, streaks of light seared through the sky like falling stars. Dust and earth shuddered as a knight of the Tyranni's household dropped in, its frame painted blue and white, with a chainsword screeching at its side and a smaller meltagun than Mortarion had expected. Most remarkable were the 4 engine nacelles mounted on its back, crude and immense, battleship engines transposed to a knight's spine. The Xenos Knight lashed out, the Tyrannus Mount's jump jets fired, and the enemy blade missed. The Tyrannus Knight leaped, swung, and cleaved the Xenos construct clean through the torso. It followed with precise melta-shots. Garrett of the Tyrannus household. "I salute you, Lord Mortarion," the knight called, offering an imperial salute as it turned toward him. "Garrett, watch the prototype," another knight cut in. "If you lose that frame, even death won't help. You'll be torn from your hull by the Lady of the Magma World herself." Garrett and his companion bowed slightly and then dropped into formation, clearing a path for Mortarion. The Angron's great axes rumbled forward, 3 imperial war engines charging the Xenos positions. On the field, Typhon had had a moment of triumph. He had psychically detonated a Xenos unit, then discovered Mortarion gone. The Death Shroud could not tell him where. Far off, Typhon finally saw the Primarch standing on a tank, grinning like a man possessed, charging into the enemy ranks flanked by 2 flying knights. Tens of thousands of Xenos lay between Mortarion and the rest of the formation. Typhon felt a cold grip in his mind. He called the Death Guard to him, found a few vehicles, and gave chase. Like Sansan Mong, watched every packet of telemetry streaming up from the planet. He felt the searing heat of the turret aboard the Crimson Hound through the suit's feedback. "How is the charging going?" he asked Mong number 1 acolyte. "Charging will be complete 13 seconds, came the reply. Tech priests murmured prayers into votive channels as data points flashed across Mong's vision. When the 13th second passed, the main cannon began to draw power through the cables, the plasma reactor spinning up, and alarms began to scream. "Warning, error, warning, error." Mong stared at the corrupt readouts. The reactor was starting to overload. He jammed coolant into the energy slot, but the flow didn't take. Systems stuttered. "Damn it, I'm gonna blow this," he thought, panic rising. "You idiot!" Captera snapped over the comms, his voice sharp and impatient. Mong dropped to his knees and offered the rote prayer of supplication. "I am not the Omnissiah. I am Captera, servant of the Omnissiah." Captera barked back before Mong could finish. "You fool, I deleted the corrupted input. If you make trouble again, I will have you thrown off the ship." The orbital strike had been due 5 seconds ago. Now it was late. Then the weapon appeared, a streak of burning light, and impacted dead center among 5 Xenos Titans. The blast lit half the sky. Whole battalions of Xenos were vaporized in an instant. Mortarion felt the world shudder beneath his feet. The tank he stood in trembled with each concussion. 2 knights flanked and shielded him from the worst of the shockwaves, while Nusarian warriors clustered around him as close as they dared. He had never seen such fanatical troops. The raw, uncompromising fervor of the Nusarians made the Death Guard's grim discipline seem almost tame by comparison. For a moment, Mortarion found himself wishing these mortals belonged to his command, but Barbaros's stubbornness was a different thing entirely, and he pushed the thought away. When they rolled into position, the pilot called up, "Lord Mortarion, give the order." Mortarion eyed the 5 titans. Fire! His voice was not loud, but it carried. The crew did not hesitate. The first shell was launched. Mortarion watched the central titan's shield visibly thin, but it held, throwing the shot aside. Explosions thundered around them, near and far, melding into one continuous roar. Engines of the siege towers stirred. The surrounding towers began clearing the Imperium forces that had been advancing. "Garrett, take the siege tower on the left," a voice roared. Garrett's pilot jettisoned restraint and engaged 4 engines, surging for the left tower. Mortarion watched him go. He saw the move as a charge to certain death and inwardly wished the man luck. "Move 70 meters to the left," Mortarion ordered. The pilot complied and threw the engines into full. There was no question the Primarchs' command must be obeyed. Nuceria's fighting spirit endured. Even after liberation, its people refused indulgence or rest. A laser beam hissed past them. Angron's great axe squadrons and the Shadow Sword batteries finally punched through the first Titan's shield. The machine collapsed with a roar and tumbled into a siege tower, crushing it. The pilot whooped with excitement. Under normal circumstances, Mortarion would have found his cheering cloying. In that instant, the sound was pure, human decency. 1 Titan fell, then a second, then a third. Only 2 now remained. Mortarion felt the anxiety settle into his gut. The ammo on the Angron's great axes was exhausted. Aside from bolters, they had nothing left. They were deep in enemy lines and alone. "Lord Mortarion," the pilot called. "Speak," Mortarion answered. "We will continue the attack," the pilot declared. "We are out of ammunition," Mortarion said flatly. The report was simple and true. "No, Lord Mortarion, our mission is to destroy the Titan. We still have 2 rocket launchers left." The pilot's voice was adamant. "I've met Lord Angron before. This is the 2nd time I've seen an imperial demigod. It's an honor to fight beside you." "Does Angron often visit you?" Mortarion asked, curiosity catching him unawares. "Yes, all Nucerians have met Lord Angron. Lord Angron and Governor Unimus inspect Nuceria often. But I shook his hand." The pilot puffed out his chest with pride. Mortarion suppressed a smile and a flicker of irritation. If a mere mortal dared to attack, how could he possibly consider retreat? "Start your engines," he snapped. "Hold on tight." The great axe answered as engines screamed to life. Behind them, a horn sounded. The Titans had been deployed. Cavalerio, Lord of the Storm, felt the Titan's machine spirit coalesce inside the cockpit. Once haunted by memories of Titans falling, he had steadied himself with the Co-Lord's counsel. "Reactor power increased to maximum limit," he reported. "The enemy has 2 Titans," Pallas noted. "Pilot Ulena Grunet of the Ash Wolf will fight alongside us. Disengage failsafes, lift restriction protocols." Cavalerio did not wait for objections. Volcano cannon charging. A holographic face flickered before him. "The Jindala, Pilot Ulena Grunet, salutes the Lord of the Storm." "Stand by my side. May the Omnissiah bless you," Cavalerio replied. "The Omnissiah always guards us," Ulena said breezily. Her warhound's attitude, blithe even in the teeth of war, made Cavalerio smile despite himself. The Legion's optimism carried a contagious heat even into the blackest lines. "We should not risk overloading the reactor," Pallas warned under his breath. The modification the Lady of the Magma World had asked him to test was risky. This could destroy the Titan. "It is worth it," Cavalerio answered. "The Omnissiah protects us. The machine spirit cries for battle. Destroy the Imperium's enemies." Pallas could only comply. When the massive black gate threw open, 7 Titans stomped into the light in a single rolling column. Cavalerio scanned the field and chose not to engage at once. Siege towers in the distance crawled forward, and his sensors picked up friendly knights among them. "Are our people up there?" he asked. "A few knights," Pallas answered. "Tell them to come down. We will clear the battlefield." "Storm Legion, Ash Wolf, target the siege towers," Cavalerio commanded. Outside the gate, beneath the ruined towers, Mortarion and his men stood in the aftermath. The Imperium Titans had already torn the siege towers to pieces. Fighters looped in the sky overhead, a dangerous ballet of friends and foe. More than 10 Nucerians had formed a thin defensive line around Mortarion, using the wreckage of Angron's great axe as improvised barricades. Burning detritus smoldered everywhere. Occasional secondary explosions rocked the ground. Another Titan went up in a storm of flame. The pilot's face was white with rage as he fixed his gaze on the remaining central Titan. That machine was their objective, its destruction, the whole point of the operation. The shelling has weakened, Mortarion observed. Imperial support was scarce, and ammo was ever more precious. Still, under Regent Gell of the Warhounds, the Imperium had managed to keep overall control of the engagement. A gunship plunged from the sky in pieces. Fragments stung the pilot's helm like hail. He stepped up to Mortarion and shouted over the din, "We have to attack!" Mortarion looked down at the man who was only a few heads shorter than him. He wondered at the brazenness, at the courage. "We have no ammunition," Mortarion said again. "No, Lord Mortarion. Our mission is to destroy the Titan." The pilot planted his boot and jabbed a gauntleted finger toward the monstrous silhouette on the horizon. "We still have 2 rocket launchers and 30-odd men." He gestured at the gathered Nucerians. They were tired and battered, but they were still there, ready. Mortarion met the pilot's steady human gaze. The plan had been foolish, perhaps suicidal, but resolve sharpened like a blade under pressure. He had commands to give, an example to set. He inclined his head once, and the line braced itself for what was coming. Section 151. His shields are down. All we need to do is be the last straw for that big fellow. Mortarion inhaled, watching the smoking siege tower nearby. "I will not babysit you." The pilot heard him and laughed. "May I shake your hand?" Mortarion ignored the bold mortal and raised his scythe, eyes on the ruined tower, where the rattle of gunfire and distant artillery still echoed. The pilot began gathering the surviving Nucerian warriors. Over 30 men moved to set up a defensive line, while another fighter streaked from the sky and crashed nearby. "Are you not afraid of death?" Mortarion asked suddenly. "Of course not, Your Highness Mortarion. I'm so afraid of death it makes me tremble." "Humans are never without fear," the pilot replied. "But His Highness Angron told us he fears death as well, and he's an imperial demigod. Fear is fear. We just have to face it." Mortarion, for the first time, really examined the man beside him, a middle-aged face, defiant eyes. Even on Barbarous, these men would be called brave. From inside the Xenos tower came sporadic, orderly gunfire, bestial roars, and the shouts of the Nucerians. Mortarion hefted his scythe and drove it into the oncoming tide, parrying and cleaving to give the mortals time. More Xenos poured out, reinforcements. He could keep fighting, but what of these men? The pilot, with his fire controller at his side, had empty laser rifles. Blood flecked his face. Mortarion could not tell if it was his or someone else's. The fire controller found a narrow gap in his Xeno's armor and drove his dagger in, only to be hurled backward, crashing against a wall scrawled with profane script. His body twitched and fell still. "Return to the co-lord," the pilot cried, sorrow and fury in his voice. He and a comrade toppled a Xenos with a rocket launcher. The pilot, expression solemn, took the fallen controller's dagger and plunged it into the Xenos' skull. "Advance!" the pilot snorted, seeing the endless tide closing in. "Your Highness Mortarion, we will hold this place." "That is not my mission." Mortarion's respirator hissed softly. The tip of his scythe was already slick with blood. Leaving these mortals here would be a death sentence, even if they might die elsewhere later. He rested his scythe on the ground and watched the Nucerians assemble. "This is your mission." His voice brooked no refusal. "Go, complete it, soldiers. The rest of you, come with me. You few, stay and guard this spot with His Highness Mortarion." The pilot roared and led a handful of men up the tower stairs. Mortarion watched the scene unfold as if it were a rising theater curtain and smiled without mirth. He carved through the Xenos ranks. Blood and organs splattered the earth. Piles of bodies gathered around him. At some point, the Nucerians' gunfire had died away. For the first time, Mortarion wondered whether those mortals could succeed. He stamped on a writhing Xenos and saw a Nucerian who had died fighting 3 enemies, having felled them all by sheer will. That stubbornness, Mortarion thought, could only come from Barbarous. A deafening boom outside the siege tower made him look up. A heavy object had fallen. Mortarion knew the pilot and his team had succeeded. After the death god finished strangling the last foe with chains, he climbed the stairs. At the top he found the pilot kneeling, exhausted and bleeding. "Mortal, congratulations." Mortarion stepped close. "Oh, Your Highness Mortarion, may I shake your hand?" The pilot whispered. Weak, he extended his hand. Mortarion hesitated, then clasped it. Mortal flesh met corroded steel. "Another Highness has shaken my hand. It was worth dying for," the pilot's voice trailed away. Mortarion looked at the man who had stood with him through half the fighting on Angron's great axe. "Mortarion!" Typhon's voice rang out. Mortarion turned to his company commander. "Typhon!" Mortarion acknowledged him. "You've arrived just in time. Let us continue the slaughter." "Where are the 16th Sector's reserves? What are they doing? Don't give me excuses." Gel barked into the comlink. He was on the line with the new Syrian general at the front. Rage and anxiety sharpened his tone. The 16th Sector near the Black Gate had been breached by the Xenos. Warhounds and Death Guard were fighting desperately. The battle had raged for 5 days. At first, the Imperium held the advantage, but ammunition had been burned away in the following days, and supply lines strained. Gel felt the pressure of responsibility like a choke chain. Across the comms, commanders' voices cracked with stress and constant requests for supplies. Mortarion had returned from beyond the front 2 days prior. After cutting through enemy lines, he'd led the Death Guard to bolster the Mortals' defenses, filling a gap the Imperial Guard's failing equipment could not. "Death Guard First Company can support the 16th Sector," Mortarion proposed, looking up. "Your troops need rest," Gel warned. "My men are resilient." Mortarion's gaze fixed on Gel. "I admit they are, but the enemy has deployed 3 more Titans and dozens of siege towers. The next engagement will be brutal." Gel brought up holographic feeds of the fronts. He addressed Fulgrim with a respectful tilt of voice. Fulgrim nodded. Gel continued, pointing to the tactical display. "I need you and your forces to hold the enemy here." "As you command, Commander Gel," Fulgrim said. "I must say, you are one of the finest Legion commanders I have seen." The praise was plain and without economy. Gel betrayed no reaction. "Get down! Get down!" Oviller, general of the Nucerian 105th Solar Auxilia, fought to impose order on a collapsing field. Nucerian blood stained the churned earth. His new recruits, once rebels on this world, shook like prey. Most of his unit's chain of command had been annihilated. The conscripts had never experienced interstellar war. After Xeno's artillery struck, many scattered like frightened birds. "I'll catch the cowards myself," Oviller cursed. Like many Nucerian commanders, he preferred to lead from the front. Any man who rose to his rank was one of Nuceria's best fighters. Form ranks! Form ranks!" he shouted, seeing Xenos charging in the distance. He seized a deserter, slapped him, then jabbed a finger in the man's face. "Look, the Xenos are upon us! Our lines are in chaos because of you. Do you fear death? We came from Nuceria to this world to die fighting, not to flee. If you can't even fight for your home, I'll give you a bullet." Oviller pressed his empty sidearm to the deserter's temple. The man's shaking subsided. Fear remained, but at least he held a gun now. "Don't fail me," Oviller barked, stowing the pistol. He blew his whistle. The Imperial Guard rallied in a ragged, determined pack. "For Nuceria! For Angron! Charge! Drive them back!" he cried. The Nucerians' courage spread like wildfire across the sector. Oviller led the line into the oncoming horde. Chainswords sang as they bit into Xeno's flesh. Oviller hacked his into a Xeno's chest, breathing hard. The position steadied into an ugly, disciplined gun line. In the distance, a modified replica of Angron's great axe, an engine of war, tore through Xeno's until its guts clogged its gears. "Fire! Fire!" Oviller's voice was raw. He watched a warhound, surrounded by swarms of Xenos, cleave all attackers down. The 9th-tier warrior fought like a machine, but exhaustion gnawed at him. Still, more Xenos poured forward. "Surround them! Surround them!" Oviller shouted as a crushing blow cracked his bones. Then bolters barked from the sky. A gunship unlike any other, different from the usual Stormbird, swept overhead, throwing down bolts of death. A giant leaped from its belly and immediately cleared the Xenos around him. When Fulgrim appeared, Oviller laughed out loud in relief. Then the laugh died on his lips as he watched Fulgrim cut a swath without regard for anything but killing. Oviller hacked another Xenos apart. Rotten ichor spilled. His guards fought in grim cooperation with the 9th-tier warrior, and Oviller strode toward Fulgrim. "Prince of the Imperium," Oviller called, abandoning formalities as he approached. "Your Highness, Fulgrim, this isn't a personal performance. This isn't a stage. Look around you. The lines of mortals are on the verge of collapse. This isn't your stage to show off on." Ovaler snapped. Mortals, mind your tongues, Emond roared. A warrior from the ninth echelon fell into formation beside Emond, raising his chainsword without a flicker of weakness. Fulgrim silently lifted his bolter and put a single round through an alien's head. It's fine, Fulgrim said, with a small, almost bitter chuckle. Ovaler inhaled and forced an apology. Fulgrim exhaled inwardly and muttered under his breath, Dead men do not applaud you. For the first time, something clicked. The Nucerians, they were as mad as Angron. Gel presented the intelligence to the senior officers. This is what our ship has transmitted. He set the hollow images before them. The breach in the defense zone has been sealed, but our men have run out of ammunition. He tasted the bitterness of the truth. Even the machine god could not replace a lost Warhounds-class Titan. If the Legion co-lord did not return soon, they would have to fight with bolters alone. The warp storm is still raging, and the co-lord has not replied to any messages. They all studied the images. Hive cities lay invaded and razed. Sacrificial rites were being performed amid blasphemous runes. Those runes made Angron's jaw tighten. They were not mere graffiti. They were components of a ritual. He lowered his head. Inzar Tyrus, didn't he get posted to the Redemption? Angron asked. He was transferred to the Crimson Hounds by the Legion co-lord, Gel answered after a moment. Bring him down. 10 minutes later, the Redemption Guard dragged Inzar Tyrus into the chamber. He was dazed, unstable. His eyes roamed and refocused when Angron called him by name. Wordbearer's priest, Angron said. Inzar's gaze sharpened. Angron pointed at the holographic image, the cities, the runes scrawled into the earth. Inzar took 2 hesitant steps forward, then stared at the projection until his face changed. This is a summoning array, he stammered. No, not only a summoning array, there's binding worked into it, temporal bindings too. They're anchoring something and holding it across time. I know, roughly, Inzar admitted, voice thin. Angron's jaw set. Gel, whatever it is they intend, we cannot let it come to fruition. Navy, prepare for orbital bombardment. He stopped as the truth hit him. The Navy's munitions in orbit had been spent supporting the ground battles. Their missiles, their torpedoes, much of it was gone. We need to stop them, Angron said with the force of a command made desperate by circumstance. His fist clenched. Mortarion rose from where he had been standing. The Death Guard were ready. The bitter miasma of Barbarus clung to the air as Mortarion inhaled. Angron saw the weight in Mortarion's face. Brother, your highnesses, Inzar Tyrus said quietly, and there was a terrible calm to his voice. They have already succeeded. The words struck the chamber like cold steel. Voices rose in alarm. Gel barked orders. Hypnos began relaying the situation to the other commands. Night, Crimson Hounds, Dawn's arrival. Enter the atmosphere. Now! Gel's shout echoed like a trumpet. It was already too late. The warp flared. Without warning, the world was wrapped in an aura that Angron knew like a wound. The air filled with a roaring that had no human source. Faces went still. Angron and Mortarion both froze as the pressure of that power slammed into every mind present. It swept through the souls of men like a blade. Now we're in deep trouble, Angron said, and there was a brittle humor to it that belied the gravity of the moment. For an instant, a strange clarity settled over him, solemnity beneath a grin. Far above, in absolute black, a dozen ships burned like pale beacons. Guilliman watched them from his command bridge, exhausted, haggard from a battle that had just ended. They had won something here, but at what cost? System AI, who had fought the hardest space engagement of his existence, exhaled in digital relief. He was already calculating the next moves. I have to worry about Angron's flank, he reported. At least a third of the enemy ships rushed in, just as you predicted. Guilliman blinked. Before those bastards get what they want, they will not allow their slaves to conduct orbital bombardments, he said warily. System AI scoffed, an untranslatable vibration. The ones who fancy themselves chess players, including your father. A pale, flickering psychic light brushed the edge of the battlefront, so faint Guilliman almost didn't feel it. System AI registered it as an intrusion, a bright pearl drifting through the immaterial winds. It carried a single, stark message that System AI rendered bluntly in data. Chaos. Guilliman felt a warmth on his mind that was not his own. Your Highness Guilliman. Captain Lotala Saren's voice snapped, sharp and urgent over the bridge. Alarm screamed. Radar screens blossomed with contact blips, aliens, warships without number. Hundreds, thousands of hostile hulls walled the combined fleet's route. Even a passage of an hour would be blocked. System AI's synthesized voice chilled the bridge. Gilliman could hear the shallow breaths of his officers. "Are you afraid?" the AI asked, almost teasing. "Never," Gilliman said. "Then fear now." System AI returned. "I regret to say I may have to personally take Unit 13. There was a pause in the stream of data. System AI's processes flared as he reached for old, dangerous things. "Conrad Kurze, come to the redemption. I will need you later." Khorne came forward at the call. Gilliman gave a small, weary smile when Khorne knelt. Unit 13's servitor arm rested on Khorne's shoulder, and a tiny node fed a data synapse into his skull. A torrent of information poured into Khorne's mind: tactical overlays, strategic histories, the raw grasp of System AI's battle memory. Khorne staggered upright as the flood hit, then Unit 13 increased pressure, and Khorne blacked out. "Captain Lotala Saren, start the engines. I'll take you out," Gilliman ordered. "I am entrusting my child to you," he added to the machine god, the thing the warriors called the AI, with equal parts resolve and pleading. "That is right," System AI responded. "The gods will not tolerate my failure." "I promised Angron I'd bring him back," Gilliman said, and there was a crack like a blade in his voice. "Yes, I am going there now to his side," System AI said. "This is deceit. Let me out, machine," some conflicting voice protested from within the control mesh. Perhaps a trapped consciousness, perhaps a forgotten servitor with dreams. "Oh," System AI answered softly. "This body is mine now. When you awaken, it will be over." "Sleep well, Gilliman. Human hope lives on." The statement hung like a benediction as the engines roared to life, and the fleet prepared to push through the ring of steel and darkness. Far, far beneath those events, the planets themselves seemed to shiver. Worlds flickered, bending as if someone had laid a great palm over reality. Darkness pooled and tried to swallow the remaining lights. The gloom moved like a poisonous mist into the Emperor's vision. The Emperor sat in his chair, cold and remote, handling an object he had fashioned for System AI. To the lieutenant in his hand, it could look like jewelry scattered through starfields. To others, it might be a device of torment. It was both a gift and a potential torment, something only System AI could wield, should the Emperor decide he would. He closed his eyes. He felt the eddies and currents of the warp, subtle, treacherous, and then his eyes snapped open. A golden, brilliant light flared within them. He slammed his fist down on the table. Malkador, the Imperial Regent, turned to the Emperor and held his breath. Section 153. What happened? How dare they? Malkador had never seen the Emperor this enraged. The gentle serenity that usually radiated from him was gone, replaced by a tyrannical, volcanic presence. He closed his eyes once more, and a cold, terrible calm settled over the chamber. The gods had struck again, and again. They were meddling because they feared the nail would ruin their plan. They wanted the game back on their terms, so they pulled a pawn from the past into the present, chose Korax's sector where the Astronomicon was weak, and set a trap. The Emperor's face was a mask of fury at the gods' shamelessness. "We received word from the 9th Legion," Valdor said as he entered, handing over a scrap of parchment. "Yes, His Highness Sanguinius sent it." The Emperor opened his eyes. He had known the gods would try to bait him. He had planned for a trap and gathered 6 Primarchs to deal with it. He had not expected his own hope for humanity to be the one lured into the cage meant for him. His fury flared anew. "Don't pay them any mind." Beyond the chamber, the warp roiled, a tyrannical storm on the horizon. The Emperor had meant to lead the fleet straight to Lycius. He could accept the loss of a Primarch, but not the butcher's nails. He could not afford to lose that. Angron's recklessness gnawed at him. What had that barbarian of a Primarch been doing? "Perhaps the outcome isn't as bad as you think," Malkador ventured. "My friend, humanity is about to lose a hope," the Emperor replied quietly. Malkador stared. He had never imagined the Emperor would prize a single Primarch so highly. He braced himself. "Then what are we waiting for? Charge!" He clenched the scepter in his hand. Even if it cost him his life, he would claw that hope back for humanity. Valdor's messenger had more to say. "My liege, we have received a strange signal." The Emperor examined the parchment more closely. He sighed, a sound that carried the weight of ages. "Go and bring the 9th Legion back. he ordered. Malkador looked up, startled. You would give up hope so easily? Humanity's hope endures, my old friend. The Emperor's voice was hoarse but resolute. He cast off the last of his restraint and rose on black, impossible wings. When his silhouette and roar cut the firmament, the minds and hearts of countless mortals reeled. To them, he was the chosen of the gods, their most beloved protector. To others, something else unfolded. Elsewhere, the air went cold. Mist spilled like ink over the battlements, and fragments of the warp surged across the landscape like rolling black tide. One shape loomed above the Imperium's defensive perimeter, a towering figure descending onto the outer walls. He was the thing they whispered about in terrified voices, Be'lakor. Lasers lanced at his wings. Be'lakor plucked a muttering soldier from the parapet as casually as a man plucks a fly, and with a gesture drew the soul out of the mortal's chest. The soul shone like a candle and was devoured. Around him, faces contorted in horror. He grinned. Damn, Xenos, a nearby defender spat, and in response, Be'lakor noticed a Nuceria soldier stooping to pick up the dropped rifle. The man prodded at his leg bone as if to steady himself, and his defiance pleased the Daemon Lord. Mortal, Be'lakor cooed, join me. I admire your courage. I am the soldier began, and then fired. The shot clipped Be'lakor's flank. The Daemon scooped the man up like a rat. Submit, or die. Screw retreat, another soldier cried, panic cutting through his voice. Be'lakor's amusement turned to fury. He crushed the officer's arm with a casual twist. The man howled. As Be'lakor looked to another defender, a laser burrowed into the officer's chest. He staggered. A grenade, the man's final act, was ripped free. Xenos, Be'lakor flung the officer aside. The explosion rent the air. And you? He mocked, turning to a sniper farther down the line. The Nucerian took a knee, peered down the scope, and steadied his breath. Tell General Ovaler there's something new in the defense zone. Let His Highness and the Imperial Supermen handle it. He fired and felt certain he'd bought them a moment. Be'lakor, enraged, slapped the sniper dead with a hand like a boulder. Ovaler's comm line crackled, then went silent. He closed his eyes and asked the only question that mattered. Where is His Highness Fulgrim? At the 13th defense line, the communicator replied. Ovaler grimaced. He could not fathom how Fulgrim, with his vanity and flair, had managed to fight over to that sector, but he knew the line could not be let fall. Iabu, he barked, calling up a rested veteran of the 9th echelon. The Nuceria need you. I am here, Iabu answered, rising at once. He looked toward Ovaler with a half-smile. Tell your echelon leader we need support. That monster on the wall is not something you or I can handle alone. I can do it, another voice boasted, and Ovaler shot back. Shut up, kid. I fought Angron before you were a space marine. Fought alongside him? No, I was the one who got beaten. Ovaler rubbed his nose, half embarrassed, half proud. Outside, the war gnawed at the defenses. New Xenos poured through the black gate in a black tide that swallowed plains and foothills. Ammunition ran low. The Lycius people retreated in terror, their cowardice stung. Cowards! Oedipus snarled as he cleaved a thing in two with a brutal sweep of his chainsword. He had answered the call for support and torn the head from a Xenos abomination beneath his boots. Around him, his squad bore fresh scars. They were running on fumes, pushed to the brink, but they would not break. 9th echelon, he roared. Follow me. They surged through the retreating rebels. Oedipus cursed the mortals inwardly for faltering, but more of them rallied to his standard. Fulgrim, with his own obsessions, had moved to support other sectors, leaving a dangerous gap in the 16th defense line. The city walls shook with explosions, bodies tumbled like rain, limbs and blood painted the battlements. Stormbirds screamed overhead, their engines coughing and failing. One went down in a shower of flame. Oedipus felt a cold, brief sorrow for the pilot's fates, then steeled himself. For Nostramo! He raced toward a stubborn defensive line, a handful of defenders holding fast while the Xenos tide closed in. He cleaved another thing into quarters and shouted over the din. Nostramans, what are you doing here? They were ragged but resolute. Where is the Nucerian officer? Oedipus demanded. Dead, Lord Oedipus. They have all sacrificed themselves, a survivor answered. Fall back to the rear, he ordered, but they shook their heads. This line must hold. We cannot abandon it, one of them said flatly. Oedipus looked at them. at their blood-streaked faces, their hands on fractured weapons. He felt something like respect stir under the anger. "You are the hope of Nostromo," he said, and it was no idle platitude. They were the thin, stubborn rock against which the tide must break. Around them, the battle howled on, gods and demons tugging at fate, Primarchs and mortals walking impossible edges. Orders flew, lives were wagered, and somewhere, far above the field of death, a decision had been made. The Ninth Legion would be recalled. Whether that could change the shape of what was coming remained to be seen. Oedipus looked down at the lieutenant in front of him. These men were Nostroman elites who had trained on Nuceria. He had no desire to see them die needlessly. The lieutenant met his gaze. "My lord Oedipus, we are humanity's hope. If we leave now, how are we any different from deserters?" Oedipus met the determination in the man's eyes. "I know what sort of foe we face. Whether Xenos or demon, Nostromans do not run." "Hold this ground, Lieutenant, and live," Oedipus ordered. He left one company of his echelon to aid the Nostromans in holding their line, then turned and ran forward. The Nucerians respected a man who made his choice. "Sir, I've lost Iabu's signal," someone shouted. "Phoenix, how far off is he?" 500 meters. 400. Damn it, he's in the sky. 9 is here. 0. Before Phoenix finished, a titanic shape struck the ruined earth and landed like a mountain. The ground trembled. Something vast turned its gaze down over the battlefield. Oedipus felt that gaze like a hand closing around his chest. He tightened his grip on his chainsword. "You're looking for this one?" the thing mocked. Balakor, demon prince of chaos undivided, let Iabu drop from his hand as if casting away a rusted toy. The power armor hit the ground with a metallic clang. Balakor laughed with the cold cruelty of a thing that has killed many times over. "Your brother's grief is delicious," he sneered, every syllable a nail hammered into Oedipus's resolve. Anger flared. Oedipus stared up at the demon prince. "Are all your Nucerians like this?" Balakor bent lower, as if studying a curious insect. "Do you know who I am, little rebel?" "Oedipus." Phoenix's voice cut into his head. Oedipus drew a breath, raised his chainsword, and gave the order through his vox. "Contact His Highness Fulgrim." Around him, the faces of his echelon were contorting as if some unseen pressure squeezed at their minds. Belakor's voice slid into their minds like cold oil. "Brave warrior, I'll grant you the chance to challenge me." "You who should have been swept from the river of history," the daemon taunted. "Your master tried to block the god's path, and he failed. I can grant you a dignified death." Balakor hefted a greatsword and drew it slowly across the shell-shattered ground. "Go to hell," he said and charged. Oedipus laughed, a brittle, nervous sound. "I can't see straight, Phoenix. The warp keeps throwing up illusions. This beast treats me like prey. I need you," Phoenix snarled over the link. "I'm still learning," Oedipus answered. "Learn on the job," Phoenix snapped. "Connect to the machine. Pilot Phoenix. Machine Oedipus. Leave the rest to me. You don't have to keep me alive. Just delay him. Delay him until Fulgrim arrives." Synchronization, 205%. Balakor merely sneered when the little armored figure roared to life. He lashed out with claws, bristling blades, and spikes. Bloodlust was Balakor's favorite weapon. He poured his memories, his fantasies, his victories and cruelties into the psychic assault, trying to overwhelm the warrior before him with the grandeur of his own damned existence. "Surrender. Give yourself." "For Sanguinius," he spat, seeking to drown Oedipus's mind in borrowed glory. For an instant, something alien bit back, a feedback that hammered at Balakor's skull. It was like an electric shock through the laws of the material world. Balakor stumbled, dazed. Phoenix seized the opening. He surged forward, chainsword blazing. Sparks spat as chitin and metal met. Phoenix slammed the blade into Balakor's chest, used the daemon's armor as a spring, and vaulted high like a fallen angel, making one last, arrogant strike. The chainsword found the daemon's neck. No blood flew, but metal shrieked. A pair of massive claws closed around the spinning blade, trying to wrench it away. "You are not so small," Balakor hissed. Phoenix could not speak. He could only roar and spit in reply. "Pah!" The blade shivered in the daemon's grip, but he had earned that moment. On the shattered plain, a short march away, Fulgrim moved like a god among men. He stepped over the bodies of the fallen and strode through the warp-hazed mist that clung to the ruins. The Phoenix Guard ringed him like jewelry, devotion made manifest, and the air itself, seemed to sing his name. He cut through Xenos as if they were reeds. Ahead, a figure shimmered and smiled. "My child," it said softly. "Why are you here?" Fulgrim scowled, bewildered. Emond, one of his officers, whispered his confusion at the apparition. The figure continued without answering them. "That abominable machine led you into a Xenos trap. I came to warn you. I cannot remain long. You must warn your brothers. This intelligence is murderous." Fulgrim's skin prickled. He could not tell if the voice was friend or trick. The figure pressed on, urgency in every syllable. "Do not be seduced. It entered your brothers' minds. It is corrupting them. I hate what it will become." "I know you do not believe me," the voice admitted. "I cannot stay. I need a host." Fulgrim's jaw tightened. The figure's need was clear. Possessing a living vessel would anchor it. "It will be painful," it warned. "For humanity," Fulgrim whispered, and his hand went out toward the apparition. "I will not hesitate, even if it costs me." A soft laugh answered him. "I did not misjudge you. Then kneel. Accept me." Fulgrim closed his eyes. He let his knees begin to fold. "Don't you dare kneel," a raw, broken voice thundered. Everyone turned. A Nucerian general burst through the carnage, gasping, blood running from where an arm had been torn away, tears streaking his face. He fell to his knees some paces from Fulgrim and roared, "I am Ovaler, general of the Nuceria Solar Auxiliaries, 105th. I am a mortal." Emmon moved to block him. "Mortal, do you know who you speak to?" Ovaler spat. "I am a psyker." "Xenos," he roared then, driving his psychic will forward in a desperate, raw flare, flinging his humanity like a hammer. The light of a human soul flared out, fierce, ragged, unbearably bright. The shining figure recoiled with a strangled scream. For a heartbeat, its pleasant mask fell away, and beneath it was something else, something six-horned and tooth-lined, a tongue laced with razor teeth. Hate poured from that true form like smoke. Ovaler's psychic blast struck the creature, but it was too late for him. His soul had been scorched by prior horrors in the warp. There was nothing left for the thing to tear free. The creature's voice, raw and triumphant, spat the name, Ovaler, as if claiming a victory no one would see. Ovaler's light guttered into ash, and the battlefield watched a mortal die trying to wrench truth from a lie. Section 155, "I, Mardell, will curse your house. I will torment every last one of your line," the demon hissed. "Bastard, then come," Ovaler snarled, watching the demon disappear in a puff of black smoke. He spat blood and dark clotted matter onto the ground. The black clumps in his mouth and wounds told everyone he did not have long. "Mortal, how did you find out?" he rasped. His Highness Fulgrim approached, despair carved into his face. "The Co-Lord told us," he said quietly. "The Emperor of Mankind would never make him bow," Ovaler managed between coughs. "Save them, purple-robed Phoenix. Save my child. Save Ayabu. There is a powerful creature there." Ovaler thought of the being he and Ayabu had encountered outside the city wall. They had been cut off. He had no way to call for help but to find Fulgrim himself. He had run here on his last legs. Fulgrim looked at him, and when Ovaler asked, answered in a low voice, "Is he your son?" Fulgrim's face was pale. "Yes. If he dies, tell him he did well," Ovaler whispered, clutching at his chest. "Cough, cough." He closed his eyes. "I will." Fulgrim lowered his head. Then, for the first time since he had arrived, he spoke Ovaler's rank. "General Ovaler." Ovaler gave a small, tired smile. "May we shake hands?" Fulgrim did not hesitate. He reached out and took Ovaler's hand. For a moment, time stilled. Then Ovaler's hand slipped from Fulgrim's and fell to the ground. Fulgrim's expression crumpled with remorse. "My lord," he said, unable to finish. "Was I wrong, Emond?" Ovaler breathed. Emmond, one of Fulgrim's scions, looked at his lord with a pained face, then shook his head. "Collect his body," he ordered hoarsely, "and forget this, everything that just happened." Fulgrim's gaze on his scions was stern and unyielding. Oedipus's soul blazed like a beacon in Be'lakor's eyes. The demon savored the fight. Over 100 exchanges already, he had pushed Oedipus to the edge again and again. The mortal's skill pleased him, but it was not enough. Be'lakor wanted to please the gods. He did not answer to any of the warp powers, yet the gods had their own perverse favor. He would give them the grandest of battles. With a massive heave, Be'lakor shoved his hand against Oedipus's chainsword. The weapon shattered, metal slashed across Oedipus's armor, and he staggered, falling to the ground with a roar. Nearby, Phoenix saw the power axe slip from Ayabu's limp hands and land on the ground. Without hesitation, he rolled, reached it, and picked it up. Ayabu's grip had loosened. Phoenix took the axe easily. Interesting, Be'lakor laughed, glaring at Phoenix as he crouched, ready. He jammed his greatsword into the earth. But uninteresting. You are weak, mortal. He extended grotesque claws and mocked. Still, you can give me a show. Please the gods. Phoenix ignored the demon's taunts and charged. The system registered the ground underfoot soften, like cotton. Phoenix halted. A claw slit upward from the soil, and he barely dodged, controlling Oedipus's body with split-second precision. I have prepared 888 demons for you, Be'lakor crowed. Prove your valor. You should be able to win, mortal. At his command, demonic forms poured from every direction. Unknown creatures, Phoenix had never seen them in any database. There were no records in the sanctuary's files. Looks like I'll have to provide the material, Phoenix muttered, and cut into the first hound-like demon. It did not bleed. He severed the head off the next one before it could strike. He slaughtered like a butcher in a market, but Oedipus's body grew tired. A demon ripped open a seam in his breastplate. Automatic hemostatic gel discharged, and Phoenix severed half the demon to stay alive. More and more foul things pressed in. The program flashed warnings. A red alarm indicated Oedipus's left arm bone had been brutally broken. For a moment, Phoenix froze. Should he die here and reset? A roar split the air. In a single breath, the purple-robed figure arrived at his side, a short sword blazing in his hand. His Highness Fulgrim stood there, the imperial demigod himself. Mardell has failed, Be'lakor said through cold eyes. Be'lakor straightened, hungry for a real fight. His Highness Fulgrim, Be'lakor the Destroyer, darling of the gods, he barked proudly. Zeno, you will die by my sword, Fulgrim answered. Be'lakor laughed, then the laugh cut off. He yanked his greatsword from the earth and charged. Fulgrim was ready. Powers unseen flashed behind Be'lakor, and for a moment the godlike force slowed Fulgrim's advance. The greatsword slammed into Fulgrim's flaming blade. Be'lakor kicked, denting the prince's breastplate inward. Fulgrim crumpled, a broken rag, rolled and tumbled, and could not reconcile that his Zeno had landed such a blow on him. His Highness Fulgrim, my power now is beyond your imagining, Be'lakor cried, flames licking his hands. He reveled in it. Look at you, like a dusty rat. Warp fire flared around him, and the physical air began to tear. The very universe seemed to fray as the warp pressed through. From Be'lakor's mouth came an ethereal miasma and a grin that promised annihilation. Demigod, you are facing a true god now. I will beat you until you kneel. Fulgrim spat, forcing himself to his feet. I will break your blade and nail your flesh to the earth. Tell me, little Phoenix, did you kneel? We shall see, Be'lakor replied as black armor crawled across his flesh. Come, Phoenix. The warp's influence had already reached the towering black tower. Angron sat silent in his wheelchair, his power armor gleaming despite his stillness. Mortarian's face was drawn, filth and rot pressed at their world, and he would not stand aside. He rose, restless. I cannot rot here, he said tightly. We must go out and fight. Jel glanced between the highnesses. The tide of demons had already swallowed much of the city wall. The sanctuary would be next, and beyond the walls, thousands of civilians would be at the mercy of the fiends. Angron would not allow that. Mortarian is right, Korax agreed, standing. He could not bear to watch his people butchered. Jel began to speak of defense, of where they were needed, but when he saw the fervor in the three lords' eyes, he knew argument would change nothing. Fulgrim is in the left defensive zone. We need men in the central and right zones, he said finally. I'll go. Before any more choices could be made, the door burst open. A column of golden psychic energy flooded the chamber. Every head turned in shock to the figure who stepped into the doorway. It was the Emperor of mankind,